And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and pedantic forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Friday. Did you ever think that we would get here? I mean, just about every week it seems to go on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's Friday. And today, I think the operative word for today is boom. I mean, there's so much to talk about. And, you know, top on the agenda this morning has to be Israel. We all knew it was coming, or at least anybody with half a brain knew that Israel was going to strike Iran at some point. I mean, you can only push people so far. I mean, on the one hand, Iran would say, "Oh, no, we don't want any trouble." And then when they're back home, they'll say things like death to Israel and death to the great Satan. So it was only a matter of time before Israel struck Iran and went after their nuclear facilities. And, I'm not one that's happy when war happens, but in this case, yeah, I'm saying it's about time. And then, of course, we have more shenanigans going on with the LA riots. More courts have jumped in and have tried to take away the president's authority. You know, I've been saying for a while that maybe Trump should abandon the presidency and take a position as an all-powerful district judge. I mean, that's how they're acting. That a district judge can say that what the president of the United States can and can't do. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's no different than, a talking head on any program, me, for instance, saying, well, I think you should do this. Well, that doesn't carry any weight, and it doesn't carry any weight with district judges. And then the culmination of, the spat between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Finally, somebody said, I'm sorry. And, when you've got two gigantic egos like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, it was kind of a coin toss as to who was going to say, I'm sorry first. Well, that's happened, and I'm going to talk about it just a little bit. And then finally, the EV mandate is gone. Yet another thing that we knew was coming. It was just a matter of time. But anyway, welcome to the program, my friends. Lots to talk about. It's Friday. It's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. This is the day where we talk about whatever you want to talk about. During the week, if you call in, you kind of have to be on the same page as me, but not on Friday. On Friday, we'll do whatever you want to do and talk about whatever you want to talk about. So the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989, Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If there's something on your mind that you want to opine about, well, then give me a call. One more time, that phone number is 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call, and I'll leave the phone lines open throughout today's program. We begin where, I think all of us probably should begin today, or at least this morning, with Israel and Iran. From Fox News, Israel hits the heart of Iran's nuclear program in Natanz facility strike. Natanz is one of the big nuclear enrichment or uranium enrichment facilities inside Iran. And I quote, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed that one of Iran's top nuclear facilities has been hit in Thursday night's strike against the regime. Quote, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. Netanyahu said. In recent months, Iran is taking steps like it never has before, steps to weaponize the enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. Hours later, officials confirmed that Iran had launched approximately 100 retaliatory drones toward Israeli territory, which the IDF at the time was working to intercept. The Natanz nuclear facility, one of Tehran's key nuclear sites, which has been flagged by security experts that in coordination with the Fordow fuel enrichment plant, could produce enough weapons-grade uranium to produce 11 nuclear weapons within a month. It's been hit in the strikes, though the extent of the damage remains unknown. Quote, we struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program, Netanyahu said in live remarks. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. The Natanz nuclear facility was at least partially destroyed in 2020 following an explosion, and satellite imagery has suggested Iran began constructing deep underground tunnels to further secure and obscure their nuclear program. Reported to the Institute for Science and International Security. It's unclear at this time whether any of the underground structures were hit in Thursday night's strike. We will not let the world's most dangerous regime get the world's most dangerous weapons, and Iran plans to give those weapons, nuclear weapons, to its terrorist proxies, Netanyahu said. That would make the nightmare of nuclear terrorism all too real. The increasing range of Iran's ballistic missiles would bring that nuclear nightmare to the cities of Europe and eventually to America. Reporting by the New York Times also suggested that the Parshan military complex had been hit in overnight strikes as well. The extent of the damage also remains unknown, as it was reported in November that the Parshan military complex had been significantly damaged in Israel's October strikes, which housed a nuclear weapons research facility. So lots of strikes across the whole of Israel. And as you might have guessed, there's very little. I mean, there's information coming out, but I really don't have specifics. It's pretty early on. I mean, they just started the strikes yesterday, so it'll be yesterday for us, last night for Israel. And, it's like I said, this has been a long time coming. Iran is the chief sponsor of terror in the world. They're funding all sorts of different groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthi rebels, all across the world, groups that hate Israel and they hate the United States, groups that, given the opportunity, would absolutely detonate a large-scale device in either country and kill as many people as possible. Now, it doesn't matter that Iran has said for a very long time, well, we don't really want to, we don't want to hurt anybody. We don't want to, launch a nuclear attack. We don't want to send missiles over into Israel. But when they go back home and they're, on their what they think is secure communications, they're saying things like death to Israel and death to the great Satan, or the little Satan and the great Satan. So, definitely talking out of both sides of their mouth. Now, I think that the United States does have some culpability in this, however. Not in the attacks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has claimed that the U.S. is not involved in any of the attacks. But let me explain what I mean by we have some culpability in this whole thing. Well, it was the presidency of Joe Biden really didn't do anything to deter Iran. In fact, in many cases, in many different ways, Joe Biden actually, increased the chances that there was going to be an attack. He unfroze assets that had been frozen in the U.S. for a really long time. It was his buddy Barack Obama who let $30 billion go to Iran. You remember all of the pallets of cash that were delivered on the tarmac? Well, that is what's driving that is the ideology of the left. And let me explain. So most Democrats, communists on the left, redcoats, They think that America needs to be knocked down a peg or two, that we have, that we've created a lot of pain and really done some really, really bad stuff in the world. Now, the truth is that in our past, America has done some bad things, but we've also done some really, really good things. And all of those historical events that Democrats often complain about not only happened in the past, they happened in the distant past. And so, I mean, the strength of America is that when we do bad stuff, we fix it. And thankfully, in at least as long as I've been alive, we really haven't done, anything too terrible. I mean, there have been military conflicts where presidents have got our troops involved overseas for somewhat dubious reasons. Iraq, for example, Afghanistan. I mean, I think that was for a good reason, but we should have done our research a little bit more. That nobody's really been able to take the country of Afghanistan. But it is a firm belief on the left that America needs to be knocked down a peg or two, and you need no more evidence than this, than the very first thing that Barack Obama did when he got into office. I don't know if you remember or not, but he went on a worldwide apology tour, apologizing to just about everybody for whatever America has done. It was thoroughly embarrassing. One of the very reasons why, and I knew what was coming with Barack Obama. I'm one of the few people that read his book. And, once I got about a little ways into it, I said, holy crap, this guy is not who he claims to be. And later we found out that actually, he really is who he claims to be. It's just nobody was paying attention. But anyway, for a really long time, many people in the U.S. and in the Democrat Party, and on the left side of all of these foreign policy things, Democrats have believed that America has been a negative influence in the world, that we just need to butt out. And frankly, we need to be knocked down a peg or two, which kind of explains why Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, to some extent, made it their mission, or one of their missions anyway, to make sure that America's influence in the world was diminished. Remember, it was Barack Obama who said that we should be leading from behind. Whatever the heck that means, that we should be in the background, that we shouldn't be standing for what's right in the world. And in fact, we should embolden other countries like Iran. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. Now, when you add into the mix the so-called Palestinians, there are many people in the Democrat Party who believe that Israel is a colonizing force, that they are the oppressors, that it is Israel that is participating in genocide. None of those things are true. That's the ideology of the left, not paying attention to history, not paying attention to anything that really makes any sense whatsoever. I mean, if you read any amount of Middle Eastern history, you'll find out, history that's actual facts. There's lots of stuff that says that Palestine was a country and that, it's always been a country, which is not true, by the way. Palestine has never been a country. The Gaza Strip has traditionally been part of Israel. And so, I mean, it is the left that continually engages in historical revisionism. And it is that historical revisionism that then fuels these flawed ideologies, flawed ways of thinking in all of their foreign policy. And all you got to do is really listen to what the Democrats are saying. And take, for example, and I'm going to play this a little bit later on in the program too, but, here's one from Tim Walz. Now, Tim Walz, in this soundbite, he's talking about the LA riots, but what I want you to listen to is his way of thinking. His thought process, if there even is one. I mean, I would question that Tim Walz was absent the day they were handing out the brains. But anyway, listen to Tim Walz. I mean, this is fundamentally ideology of the left. So take a listen. Here we go.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared.
No reasonable person could ever legitimately compare Donald Trump or ICE agents to the Nazi Gestapo. That's just not possible. I mean, like I said, it is possible. You can do that. But the point here is that none of it makes any sense whatsoever, simply because there is no comparison. But people like Tim Walz, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, the list is long and distinguished, have long believed that that the United States is a negative influence in the world, that somehow us projecting power and strength is negatively affects other cultures. And when you add in their belief in multiculturalism, just look what that is. And let me give you a definition of what I mean by multiculturalism. We have long said that America is a melting pot, that if you choose to come to America, then you assimilate into our society. You add your cultural differences into ours. And I mean, that's what makes America such a great nation, that we're made up of a whole bunch of different cultures that combine to make a great country. Multiculturalism is exactly the opposite. It is, instead of being a melting pot of different cultures, rather it is making sure that cultural distinctiveness is kept intact. Now that's pretty flawed, because I mean it means that you're going to set up your own belief system, your own legal system, though I mean that's completely illegal in America, but you try to anyway. Think about all the communities in America. And you don't see this very often, but there are a lot of communities which are predominantly Muslim. Dearborn, Michigan is the classic example. But there are different pockets of Muslim communities across the country that are trying to enact Sharia law instead of assimilating into the American society. But multiculturalism is a method by which you can stamp out American distinctiveness. And the distinctiveness of America is that we take the best parts of all cultures and combine it into one big soup, and we're a greater country for it. Well, the left, they look at this entirely differently. They see that way of thinking as a negative force in the world, that having an overpowering military that can protect this country and that can protect our allies, Democrats and those on the left see that as a negative thing, that we shouldn't have that much power, that we shouldn't have that influence throughout the world. So you have two completely different worldviews. And that's how you get people like Tim Walz, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. Now, there's been a lot of news. I mean, little bits and pieces that are coming out of Israel, and I expect today we'll have quite a bit more. But here's a couple of updates from Fox News. Israeli diplomat says the country will pursue peace through strength at every cost. And this is from the Israeli ambassador. His name is Yechiel Leiter. And he said in a video update that was posted around 2 a.m. this morning that Israel has seen considerable success in its historic preemptive strike on Iran. He also called for patience and perseverance, saying that it was going to be a long haul. Here is what the Israeli ambassador to the United States had to say early this morning.
The hour is late, but I just left the Situation Room here in the Israeli Embassy in Washington to give you a brief update. Our operations began about 5.5 hours ago, and so far, we have considerable success, thank God. Much of the top brass of the Iranian army, the IRGC, has been taken out. Scientists that are working on the nuclear weapons program have been taken out. Infrastructure has been destroyed. We've affected their ballistic missile program, but there's much more to be done. This will be measured in days, not in hours. This is a long haul, and we need patience and perseverance. But I'll say this. If Iran would have achieved a nuclear weapon and would have used it, the eulogies for the state of Israel would have been the most beautiful eulogies ever written. But we're not interested in eulogies. We're interested in life. We've come home to live and to live in peace. And we're going to pursue peace through strength at every cost.
And rightfully so. And interestingly enough, it's Senator John Fetterman. You know, I mentioned him earlier this week that he kind of surprised me. I thought he was going to be a radical leftist when he got elected, but he's the one that's speaking out in Congress, the one on the left anyway, saying that Israel just needs to keep going, to continue their strikes on Iran. And, you know, in my opinion, we've got to destroy the Iranian mullahs. Now, that's not to say that we need to destroy the entire country, because it was not that long ago that the Green Revolution in Iran was starting. That's one when during the Barack Obama administration. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but the protesters had spray painted all over Tehran, "Obama, help us." And Barack Obama did nothing because it didn't serve the leftist interest to overthrow the mullahs in Iran. But it was a perfect opportunity to do that, and it was entirely wasted. Now, it wasn't that long ago that I heard on a couple of radio programs that there has been some talk in Iran, different groups, that perhaps the son of the Shah of Iran was returning and making some inroads with different groups. Well, I mean, that's great, and I think that would be a great thing to get rid of the mullahs and the Ayatollah, but you got to overthrow him first, and you got to get rid of that entire regime before you can make any headway. And, maybe Israel will do that, maybe not. But the truth is, it is an all-hands-on-deck effort. The United States, and specifically those on the left, have allowed Iran to become more powerful. They've allowed them the means to fund all of these different radical groups. And so, like I said at the beginning, this is going to has to be a team effort, and if it isn't, it's going to fail. So another little update from this morning, that Israel says it tricked the Iranian Air Force leaders into meeting before the deadly strikes, and this one's also from Fox News. An Israeli security official told Fox News that Israel was able to trick top commanders of Iran's Air Force into gathering for a meeting. Quote, "We carried out specific activities to help us learn more about them, and then used that information to influence their behavior," the official said. "We knew this would lead them to meet, but more importantly, we knew how to keep them there." The official added that the strikes were more successful than Israel had anticipated. According to the source, air defense systems and ballistic missiles that were intended for use against Israel were preemptively targeted. So not only was there just widespread attacks on or strikes on nuclear facilities, there were also strategic military strikes within Iran to cripple their response efforts. And I think if you look at Israel's response to the October 7th attack, when they sent, when they did the airstrikes across Iran and took out their Air Force, the result or the reaction by Iran was to launch a whole bunch of ballistic missiles, some of which didn't even make it to the target, most of which ended up getting destroyed by the missile defense system in Israel. And that was their response. I mean, it wasn't to launch a large-scale military action. It was a weak response, just so the mullahs could show their people that, oh, look at how strong we are, and we're launching an attack. So if you fast forward to now, what Iran did this morning was launched about 100 drones at Israel, and from all reports, I haven't seen any reports this morning that any of those drones hit their target. So so far, the response from Iran has been kind of tepid. And, we can only hope that, they don't really have the ability to respond. But there are other people who are not really on the side of Israel. One of those is France. Oh, Emmanuel Macron. He's been calling for, quote, maximum restraint and de-escalation in the wake of Israel's strikes on Iran. This one's also from Fox News in their little update section. French President Emmanuel Macron reiterated his country's opposition to Iran's nuclear program, but urged, quote, all parties to exercise maximum restraint in the wake of Israel's historic strikes. In his statement, Macron also reassured his people, saying that he would take, quote, all necessary steps to protect French nationals and diplomats in the region. Peace and security for all in the region must remain our guiding principle, Macron wrote. Now, Emmanuel Macron has, for a really long time, not been a friend of Israel. He has been he is most definitely solidly on the left. He's been participating in pretty much all of the really, really terrible foreign policy positions for the last 8 years. Macron is a leftist. He is not one of those people that are really friends to conservatism or for national security or for the security of Israel. And so you should take whatever he says with an absolute grain of salt. There's no reason why you should even believe anything. He was right there with Joe Biden in empowering Iran, backhandedly, of course, Joe Biden, not even Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron can come out front and say, Iran needs to develop their nuclear facilities. I mean, they're not that stupid, but behind the scenes, absolutely. They're totally the people that were on board with the Paris, or the, what do they call it? The Iran nuclear deal. I can't remember the big, long acronym that they used right now, but they were totally right in the middle of all of that. And, they're the people that claim, well, this will prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Yeah, it's bullcrap. It was bullcrap from the very beginning, and it was a total smokescreen by Barack Obama to hide it from the people, what actually Iran was doing. And, just think about that. Any reasonable person will look at the country of Iran and say they really do want to kill Israel, and they really do want to kill the United States. Now, what type of person does it take to sit back and say, well, I think that we should absolutely let Iran have more money and more ability to enrich uranium and more ability to build a nuclear weapon? What type of person do you have to be to hold that belief? Well, there are a lot of them in the Democrat Party and on the left. So, just keep that in mind. Here's another update. This is the one on the drones that I was referring to earlier. Israel and its allies and regional Arab countries together intercepted Iranian drones fired in retaliation for the massive Israeli strike launched early Friday, stopping them before they reached Israeli airspace. As Breitbart reported earlier, Iran launched 100 drones at Israel after the Israeli Air Force hit targets across Iran in a surprise attack. Israelis were advised to remain near bomb shelters. However, the Jerusalem Post reported that the drones were all intercepted outside of Israel, as in an earlier Iranian attack on Israel in this past April. IDF's the Israeli Defense Forces Home Front Command rescinded the order to stay near sheltered areas nationwide on Friday morning, following a reduced threat analysis after the military said it had intercepted drones launched from Iran. The IDF has not officially confirmed that every single drone was shot down, and there could be many more launched. But at this time, enough were shot down to make the home front instructions temporarily more lenient. As of April of this year, several countries reportedly participated in shooting down Iranian drones that crossed into their airspace. Meanwhile, Israel continued its assault on Iran's remaining air defenses, the IDF said in a statement. In recent hours, Israeli Air Force fighter jets, guided by precise intelligence from the Intelligence Directorate, completed a large-scale strike. Okay, the rest of this we already know. So anyway, the drones were launched from Iran into Israel, and apparently Israel was able to rebuff any of those attacks. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the LA riots and what's going on there. There's another more powerful judge that thinks he's the president of the United States. Ah, man. It is upside down, backwards land in America. We'll talk about that coming up next. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Open Live Friday. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If you want to be part of the program, if there's something on your mind you want to talk about, something that has been stuck in your craw for the entire week, go ahead and give me a call, and we'll talk about it. It is Friday the 13th, my friends, and, this has always been a pretty lucky day for me. Every once in a while, my birthday falls on Friday the 13th. Not this month, of course. It's in September. But it's considered by many to be a very unlucky day. And, maybe if you're in Iran, it's probably an unlucky day. But it was, and the history behind this is a little bit murky. But a lot of people that I know, and this is kind of where I think the genesis of the superstitious part of Friday the 13th came from, is that in 1307, on October 13th, the Pope issued an order to arrest all of the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were a religious order of knights extraordinarily involved in the Crusades, who had become extraordinarily powerful in Europe at that time. They became one of the biggest bankers of all things, and the papacy pretty much saw the Knights Templar as a threat to the power of the president of the papacy. And so on October 13th of 1307, an order was issued to arrest all of the Knights Templar, torture them, and kill them. And so that's a pretty unlucky day if you happen to be a member of the Knights Templar. So anyway, it's Friday the 13th. Don't do anything crazy. And, unless you're me, make sure that you're not walking underneath any ladders or breaking any mirrors or stepping on any cracks in the sidewalk or whatever the superstition is. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's yet another federal judge who thinks that he has assumed the powers of the presidency. And this is how fast things are happening now. There was a Ninth Circuit Court judge yesterday that said that Trump had to relinquish control of the National Guard back to the state of California. And then I've got another piece this morning that shortly thereafter, I think it was last night, but we'll get to it. But that order has already been overturned by an appeals court. So in the span of less than 24 hours, you had one district court judge saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. President, you're not the commander-in-chief anymore." And then another district judge saying, "Yeah, no, not so much. He's the president." So this thing is changing really, really rapidly. But a Ninth Circuit let me start that again. A Ninth Circuit Court judge granted a temporary stay of order for the Trump administration to hand back control of the California National Guard. A U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer issued the decision, and he's a San Francisco-based judge, by the way, Thursday, siding with Governor Gavin Newsom and ordering Trump to return control of the Guard to the state forthwith. Quote, "His actions were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority and violating the 10th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States," Breyer wrote. "He must therefore return control of the California National Guard to the governor of the state of California forthwith. Federalism is not optional," the ruling states. "Even the president cannot legislate by fiat." All right, this is the hilarious part of it. Now, those people on the left care about the 10th Amendment. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that President Joe Biden was issuing mandates across the country, and all of these judges were silent. Or, in fact, they were just shooting down lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, saying, absolutely, the president can do whatever he wants. Now, the 10th Amendment is important. Recent anti-ICE protests have led to riots. We're going to talk about those for a little while on today's program. Looting and clashes with federal agents in Los Angeles. Trump issued a proclamation invoking federal authority, but Breyer rejected the justification, calling it constitutionally hollow. In his order, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer granted the plaintiff's request for a temporary restraining order and took immediate action to halt federal control of the California National Guard. Quote, "Defendants are temporarily enjoined from deploying members of the California National Guard in Los Angeles. Defendants are directed to return control of the California National Guard to Governor Newsom." The court stayed the order until noon, June 13th of 2025, giving the defendants a narrow window to comply. Plaintiffs were also ordered to post a nominal bond of $100 within 24 hours. Looking ahead, Judge Breyer scheduled a hearing to determine whether the temporary restraining order should become a preliminary injunction. On Thursday evening, the government's emergency motion led to a temporary stay by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals of the district court's restraining order, with a response due by June 15th, reply due by June 16th, and a Zoom hearing scheduled for the 17th. The Ninth's order said, quote, the court has received the government's emergency motion for stay pending appeal. The request for an administrative stay is granted. The district court's June 12th temporary restraining order is temporarily stayed pending further order. California Attorney General Rob Bonta praised the ruling Thursday night, calling it an important step for, okay, so it's another district judge thinking that he has the power over the entire country. Now, the truth is that presidents, almost all presidents, have used the National Guard to fix problems within a state. It was George Bush Sr. who used the National Guard to stop the LA riots after Rodney King. So there's a perfect example. Nothing was done there. And I mean, there have been several other examples where the president has used the power of the executive office to quell riots in a number of different jurisdictions, riots that the local authorities were not able to take care of. So, I mean, there's absolute precedence for the president of the United States to be able to do this. Of course, he could always, call on the Insurrection Act, the same act that George Washington used during the Whiskey Rebellion. Which, by the way, that is a fascinating story. I mean, that is the only time in American history where a U.S. president has led troops into battle. And I mean, okay, so it's George frickin' Washington. And I mean, really, who's going to say no to him? And I mean, it was a different time, but it was George Washington that led his troops towards western Pennsylvania during the Whiskey Rebellion. Now, interestingly enough, those people involved in the rebellion surrendered before George Washington got there. Smart decision on their part. Only a moron would go up against George Washington. I mean, honestly. But anyway, he used the Insurrection Act. It's the same act then as it is now, and there's no reason. I mean, and if you look at what's happening in L.A., the state of California, at least they were refusing to enforce federal immigration law. And this is where I wanted to use that Tim Walz piece because, there has been. And you know what? Hold that thought. I want to get there. I've got another piece of news on that, and I don't want to get things too out of whack here. So I mentioned that things are happening pretty dynamically in California. So last night, yesterday, whatever time it was, judge on the Ninth Circuit says that Trump has to give up control of the National Guard. Well, by this morning, the lower court judge's order instructing President Trump to return control of the 4,000 National Guard troops has been overturned or temporarily blocked late Thursday in the federal appeals court. So it wasn't necessarily, it was like Judge Breyer says, no, President Trump, you can't do this. And then just a couple of hours later, there was an appeal and the judge said, okay, yeah, you do have the authority to do that. But here's that piece. Quote, the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decision does not mean that the court will ultimately agree with Trump, but Reuters reports that it does leave command of the Guard with the president for now. CNBC notes the U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer had ruled Trump's action was, quote, illegal, but stayed his order from taking effect until 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday to allow the Trump administration to appeal. The administration promptly did just that. It asked the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to block Breyer's ruling from taking effect. The Ninth Circuit, in temporarily granting that request, scheduled a hearing for Tuesday. A 3-judge panel of the appellate court will consider arguments on whether to extend a stay of Breyer's order or allow his ruling to take effect. Trump, over the past week, federalized 4,000 members of the California National Guard and mobilized another approximately 700 U.S. Marines to respond to violent anti-ICE protests roiling Los Angeles. Newsom and the California attorneys general sued to reverse Trump's takeover of the Guard without the consent of the governed. The first time in U.S. history a president had taken such action. Yeah, well, okay, so it's the first time that a governor has sued, but, a lot of this is reminiscent of different situations that have happened in the past. I mentioned the LA riots with Rodney King. Perfect example there. There were National Guard troops that were sent to Portland to protect federal buildings. So, I mean, this is nothing new here. The president absolutely has the authority to stop an insurrection. And if you look up the definition, and, maybe I'll do that during the next break. Look up the word insurrection, and we'll see if what's happening in L.A. meets that definition. Words mean things, my friends.
2 + 2 is 4, not 5 if you want it to be 5. And this is not to be discriminatory. This is to stand up for language. Words mean things.
Words do mean things, and the left should know this more than anybody. They are the masters of monkeying around with language to lead you to believe things that just aren't true. And man, you are getting so many examples of this in the LA riots. Well, it's not an insurrection. The president doesn't have the authority. Gavin Newsom is already running for president. I mean, did you listen to his ridiculous statement? I should have got a soundbite of that for today's program, but it was chock full of a whole bunch of lies. The biggest one being local law enforcement is able to handle this. We had it well in hand. This is only happening in a small area, a couple of blocks in downtown LA. A whole bunch of things that were demonstrably not true. So there's a lot of stuff happening here. Let's hear. Back to the... So the White House had called Breyer's original order unprecedented and said that it, quote, puts our brave federal officials in danger. The district court has no authority to usurp the president's authority as commander-in-chief, White House spokesman Anna Kelly said in a statement. The president exercised his lawful authority to mobilize the National Guard to protect federal buildings and personnel in Gavin Newsom's lawless Los Angeles. The Trump administration will immediately appeal the abuse of power and looks forward to ultimate victory on this issue. Let me just ask you a question. If the president is not in control of the National Guard, why do we have National Guard troops deployed all over the world? The lovely Christine and I have a very good friend of ours who's in Kuwait right now. How did she end up there if the president doesn't have authority over the National Guard? How is that possible? How could the military deploy National Guard troops to any number of countries? I know a lot of people who were part of the National Guard who ended up in Afghanistan. So the assertion by Gavin Newsom and Judge Breyer lacks historical precedent. It lacks precedent in law. And really what you're seeing is a bunch of hyper-partisan judges who were rammed through the Senate by Joe Biden's administration, who are really nothing more than a bunch of partisan leftists. Really, when you get down to it, just think about it, right? This judge is saying, well, it violates the 10th Amendment. You can make all sorts of things, but make up all sorts of claims, but that doesn't necessarily make them true. And it doesn't make them true in this case. Now, there's another piece of this that, I've heard several times in several different outlets. Looking this morning, there are a number of different pieces, across the different media outlets showing that these protests are anything but organic. And this is typical of the left. Let's go back to the Occupy Wall Street protests. Y'all remember that? Where there was this anti-capitalist, sit-in, I guess, sleep-in, whatever you want to call it, right outside in New York, right outside the New York Stock Exchange. Occupy Wall Street, it was called. Now, the left tried to make it seem like all of those protests were just happened. It was just the people rising up. They were completely organic. When we found out that it really wasn't organic at all, that it was a bunch of labor unions funding all of this. Well, this is pretty much the same in this case. There's an interesting piece in ZeroHedge.com. From ZeroHedge.com. It's entitled Anti-ICE Propaganda Being Spread by Coordinated Influencers. Now, I have so many questions about this. First, I don't really understand what a social media influencer is, though I have seen some allusions to maybe I am a social media influencer, and I suppose, depending on your definition, might be the case, except, of course, that Cowboy State Politics is the largest podcast in Wyoming, and It is the most listened to, and it is on the list of the top 100 podcasts that you should listen to. By the way, the program has actually gone up on that list. Instead of we started out, we were number 36 on the list of the top 100 podcasts. Now we're number 33. So, I mean, who knows where this program is going to end up. But in any case, there are a number of different social media influencers that are being paid. I would say that they're being paid. Let's see here. Here we go. Here's that video. Being
in a country that you're in
here we go.
illegally is a civil offense, not a criminal one. You know what else is a civil offense? Jaywalking.
And being undocumented is not a criminal offense. It's a civil one. And if you've ever jaywalked, congratulations, because you've also committed a civil offense.
Have you ever sped over the speed limit? Have you ever drank or smoked?
Okay, well, all right, we're going to stop right there just for just a second. But did you notice they've all got the same, the same line? It's a civil offense. It's no different than jaywalking. And a whole bunch of them using the same script. It kind of leads you to believe that maybe they're all being paid by the same people. Let's let this continue.
It's underage. Have you ever drank and then driven a car? What about jaywalking?
Being undocumented in America is a civil offense. It's not a criminal one. It's the same caliber of crime as a traffic offense.
Just a reminder, in case anyone forgot, being undocumented is a civil offense, not a criminal one.
If you've so much as littered on public property, I never want to hear, oh, but they broke a law, as a justification for your hate.
Okay, so there you have a number of, and I don't even know who these people are, but clearly they have some sort of following on social media, and they've all got the same script. It's no different than what the Democrats do when it's very obvious that they all have the same talking points. I mean, you've seen what I'm talking about, right? When different members of Congress, different members on the left, they all issue statements, and all of them largely are pretty much the same thing. That they've got the same talking points. They all got the memo in the morning, and the left is really good at this. They get everybody on the same page. And, they make sure that it's the same message pounded over and over and over again on a variety of different outlets. You see this in the media, too. The PMSNBC, the Communist News Network, CNN, I guess that is the Communist News Network, ABC, NBC, all of them got the same memo, and it's all the same talking points. The View is another great example. You'll hear all of those talking points all along. I mean, it's like they are all on the same page. And so with all these so-called social media influencers, they're all saying the same thing. So from zerohedge.com, there appears to be a new coordinated and funded effort to get online influencers to rally anti-ICE sentiment and encourage leftists to oppose the efforts to enforce U.S. immigration law. Dozens of TikTok and Instagram influencers have posted videos practically saying the same thing, with scripts that appear to be written by the same entity behind the message. Conservative influencer Colin Rugg collated a number of the videos into a supercut, highlighting how they all regurgitate line-for-line comparisons between illegal immigration and nonviolent crimes such as jaywalking. That's the one that I just played for you. Rugg also notes that the influencers have all been instructed to denounce other influencers as bad for not speaking out against ICE raids and efforts to apprehend illegal aliens. In a related development, a TikTok influencer has claimed that he was offered $200 to join the so-called No Kings mobilization scheduled in major cities this weekend, which, by the way, there are no so-called No Kings rallies scheduled across Wyoming tomorrow. I've had a number of people send me different notices. Oh, hey, this is happening in Buffalo. This is happening in Sheridan. This is, there's a whole bunch of them. The thing is, though, there are only so many Democrats, so many radicals in each community. And every single one of these so-called protests that I've seen, that have gone downtown to photograph and watch and talk to people, it's all the same folks every single time. So it's not really like there's this huge organic protest that's happening. The one in Sheridan is being pushed by the Sheridan County Democrat Party. I'm sure the state Democrat Party is pushing it. If we went to their social media pages, we'd probably see very much the same thing. Attend the No Kings protest. I mean, it's all AstroTurf. I mean, it is no more organic than that. And I mean, I don't even know what else to say about it. All of this stuff is coordinated, but it is being coordinated from what I think are the higher levels of the Democrat Party. Now, earlier on in the broadcast, I played for you the Tim Walz soundbite. And let's listen to it again. This one's important because it's now. I'm not saying that Tim Walz is in the upper echelon of the Democrat Party, nor am I saying that he's all that influential in Democrat politics. But he is a governor, and he did run for vice president, and so that he is one of the people that's out there saying how terrible Trump is and all of these ICE people are. He does carry some weight. And I mean, if you're one of these dumb social media influencers who definitely are being paid, I mean, you watch the video and most of these people didn't even get dressed up for their video. I mean, they're in their sweats or whatever. I mean, maybe that's the way these social media influencers work. I mean, I don't even know how that all works out. You know, I put an extraordinary amount of effort into producing Cowboy State Politics and certainly Cowboy State Politics Live. Now, usually I've got a producer that does a lot of this for me. By the way, Ken, hurry back. I need you, man. I mean, running all this stuff myself, while I'm learning a heck of a lot, I think you should stop playing hooky and get back to producing the program. Anyway, by the way, Ken will be back on Tuesday for next week's Cowboy State Politics Live. But anyway, back to Tim Walz. So let's listen to this again.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared.
Shoved into the vans and disappeared. You know, no chance for due process. And I am so sick of that phrase, I have to tell you. I mean, all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, they're making the same claim. These people aren't getting due process. Well, the truth is they are getting due process, just a different level of it. If you are not a United States citizen, you are not entitled to all of the rights that are in the Constitution. You are not entitled to, the full measure of due process. When the very first thing you did coming to America was violate immigration law, you forfeited a lot of that right. And this Maryland guy who was brought back on charge, by the way, that's not going to end up very good for him. He's going to prison. But anyway, he's a Maryland man. He didn't get due process. Well, that's not true at all. 2 judges told that guy that he could be scooped up at any time and deported. Going in front of a judge, by definition, is due process, no matter what Tim Walz or anybody else says about it. Well, day before yesterday, I think it was. And let's see. Yeah, here we go. Here's that piece. So Tim Walz and a number of governors were hauled in front of Congress and made to answer for a lot of the claims that have been made, that they have been making. We just heard the big one from Tim Walz, that all these ICE agents are Gestapo, that they're just rounding people up and disappearing them in the middle of the night. First of all, I mean, the comparison is absolutely outrageous. I mean, he's insinuating that ICE agents, law enforcement officers, are akin to members of the SS, the Nazi Gestapo. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. But anyway, he was hauled in front of Congress, and here's what happened. I mean, I don't think this was very comfortable for him, but take a listen to it. It's kind of long, but we'll go ahead and listen to it.
I guess you just claim that you support policies. You're not a sanctuary state, but you support policies that prevent ICE from doing their job.
Congressman,
isn't that right?
That is incorrect, Congressman. We follow the same laws when you were in the Minnesota House. The law has not changed,
if you'll allow me, I've got limited time. Well, that's what you tweeted, by the way, sir. And on May 23rd, 2018, you tweeted, quote, "I support policies that keep law enforcement from enforcing federal laws," close quote. On May 17th, just this spring, at the University of Minnesota Law School's commencement ceremony, you said, quote, "Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets." When you said the words modern-day Gestapo, you were referring to ICE agents. Gestapo, by the way, sir, was the official secret police of Hitler's Nazi Germany. So you're calling ICE agents modern-day Nazis. Given the attacks on ICE agents that took place in Los Angeles over the weekend, don't you regard your dangerous inflammatory rhetoric as a problem?
The questions, do you want me to answer first?
So, sir, it saddens me that you refuse to express regret from comparing ICE to Nazis. ICE agents are brave Americans who get up every morning, leave their families, and put their lives in harm's way to protect our country, sir. You, at the very least, owe an apology to these dedicated public servants. I will say, sir, inflammatory rhetoric such as yours and the other governors on this panel is responsible for putting a target on the back of every ICE agent who is risking their life to protect our communities.
Well said. Now, obviously, Governor Tim Walz was not very comfortable. I mean, you heard the long silence in there, and he refused to even respond. Now, I would say that there weren't a lot of questions in Representative Tom Emmer's tongue lashing of Governor Walz. But I think the insinuation was there, right? Like, explain yourself. Why did you say that ICE agents are members of the Gestapo? Now, the other thing that I think is interesting in this piece is Representative Tom Emmer says that Walz was engaged in dangerous rhetoric. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. Yes, words mean things. And when people in positions of authority say things, yeah, it does mean things. And, when you have somebody like a governor of a U.S. state comparing ICE agents to the Gestapo, and even you could ask any state representative, not a governor, not anywhere close to a governor, they're very careful about what they say. There's a lot of times where Agent 29 looks at me and he's just like, just shaking his head. Oh, God, don't get me involved in this. But, it does have an effect. And, if you're the governor of a state, you should be very careful about what you say because it does have an impact. Clearly, we've got a number of hundreds, if not thousands of rioters in downtown L.A. burning cars and attempting to burn buildings. And so, yes, governors need to be careful. And I am absolutely shocked that it was Tim Walz, that a U.S. governor was saying that. But, we shouldn't be all that surprised. I shouldn't be shocked by it because it's Tim Walz who ran for vice president. He said all sorts of crazy stuff during the presidential election. Almost, I would say 80% of it was not true. We all saw him before the debate and what J.D. Vance did to him during the debate. And so, Tim Walz, he says a lot of crazy stuff. But when he's called to account for it, he backs up and he can't defend it. And perhaps that's the point of this whole thing. The Democrats really don't have a leg to stand on in any of this stuff. They can't explain their actions. For them, they can just say whatever they want, and they don't think that there's any repercussions to it. You do have the right to say whatever you want, but there's consequences to go along with that. No right is absolute, no matter if you're the governor or if you're a guy that runs a radio podcast. You're held accountable for what you say, even though you got the right to say it. When we come back, Elon Musk has said he's sorry. I think that's important. He did a good thing. We'll talk about it in just a second.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Open Line Friday. If you want to call and be part of the program, you still got an hour left to do it. And the phone number is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the phone number here in the Cowboy State Politics studio. Like I said, whatever you want to talk about, give me a call and we'll do it. Phone lines have been open the whole program long, so whatever. So before the break, I was telling you how a lot of these protests down in L.A., or I guess on the left coast, whatever, however you want to call it, they're not organic at all. And all you need to do is look to the history of a lot of these left-wing protests. Most of them are, I would say that, I would put money on it that all of them are pretty well funded by outside groups. And it's people that are fundamentally opposed to yours and my conception of what this country actually is. That it's a free nation built on the free market and rights enumerated in the Constitution. But, a lot of these people on the left, they are not in favor of your freedom, nor are they in favor of capitalism or the free market or free speech or anything really that's in the Constitution. Rather, they're more interested in, in communism, in socialism, in what they can get out of government, in power. And so this piece from Zero Hedge that I brought up to you, it's they've got some proof that, maybe all of these things are funded by leftist organizations. Now, I just threw up on the screen. I should watch how well, maybe I did throw up on the screen with all these groups. But you can see that a lot of them, and some of them are pretty hard to read out. But there's MoveOn.org. There's NTEU. And there's a lot of them. And let's see here. Maybe this one. Let's see here. Let me go find another one. I've got a number of these pictures that I downloaded this morning just to show you who these people are. Here's another one. Third Act. Vote Save America. Voices of Reason. Win Without War. The Working Families Party. Let's see here. I've probably got another one here. Just let me look. Yep, there's a third one. Oh, here we go. And let's see here. Let me just take this away so you can see all of it. The Chicago Women Take Action, Color of Change. Color of Change, that group was started by Van Jones. The guy that's always on CNN, and he's now he's some sort of political commentator. Well, he's the radical communist, actually. If you read some of his early writings, he absolutely was part of Students for a Democratic Society. And I don't know if he was actually a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, but he's the guy behind Color of Change. But it's a lot of groups, NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are funding a lot of these protests. Now, there was a headline, and I didn't print it off for the program, but a headline yesterday that they found the guy who was handing out face shields, bionic face shields is what they were called. They arrested him, and they're going to prosecute him. There's been a lot of pictures floating around social media of pallets of bricks being delivered in close proximity to where all of these protests are happening. Now, I take with a grain of salt what I see on social media because it's really hard to verify the source of a lot of these things. And so, it's I don't show them to you. I don't refer to them very often. You'll see outlets like the Cowboy run a story about what they saw on social media. I think it's entirely irresponsible. Unless you verified the sources of it and verified the sources of those pictures. But there again, on the other side of this, there's a lot of independent journalism that's happening. People on the ground, one of the more famous ones is Andy No. He's the guy that got beat up by Antifa for, putting out some undercover video that he took of them and their activities. And so there's a lot of on-the-ground journalism. And, I'm just saying, be skeptical. Question it, try to find the source of where it came from. But the truth is, when it comes to these LA riots, and none of them are organic, they're all funded by NGOs. And that all those pictures I showed you, let me just throw another one up there just so you can look at it while we're talking about it. All of these NGOs, they're listed on the No Kings website. And for the No Kings protests that are happening across the country, all these people are very open, out in the open about what they're doing. And if you want to know any more information about any of these folks, go to a website called Influence Watch. I use it all the time, and it's if you've got a group that's got a flowery sounding name to it, look it up on Influence Watch. You can almost always find some information. A lot of times you can find their tax information, where they're getting their money. But none of it is organic, and it's all being funded and pushed by the left. There's a lot of labor unions that are involved in this whole effort. And, of course, labor unions are involved because they're fundamentally opposed to the Trump administration. And they're absolutely in favor of illegal immigration. And just think back to the interview with Harriet Hageman that I played for you yesterday, when she said that, a lot of what's happening is NGOs advocating for criminals. If you are an illegal immigrant, you are absolutely, by definition, a criminal. The law applies to everybody, right? No one is above the law is the mantra that we heard over and over and over again during, the campaign, during the Biden administration. No one is above the law. Well, with the Democrats, what they say only applies to that current situation. They don't believe what they're saying. And a lot of us, and I tell you this all the time, but conservatives and liberals, we have a hard time understanding each other because we have two completely different worldviews. I often question, well, how can these people sleep at night? All they do is lie. Adam Schiff, great example, right? That guy, for weeks, months on end, said he had direct evidence of Russia collusion. And when it all came down to it, he didn't have any evidence at all. Not anything, not a single shred of paper that said that Trump was actually guilty of that, of Russia collusion, that is. So the question is, how does he sleep at night? It's easy, because when you believe that the ends justify the means, that is, your end goal is more important than anything, and it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you achieve it, that includes lying. Lying is completely acceptable. Hurting people is completely acceptable. Now, conservatives, we have an entirely different worldview. We would never say that the ends justify the means. In fact, we believe that how you get somewhere is at least as important as the end goal itself, sometimes more important. And so you have two fundamentally different worldviews. And so for the Democrats, they don't have a problem paying protesters. They don't have a problem paying social media influencers to push a message that is verifiably not true. And there again, how do you get dozens of social media influencers all on the same page to say the exact same thing? Well, you pay them. That's exactly what's happening here. I mean, all of it. So anyway, the LA riots, and let's see here. I do have a piece of sound from President Trump in the Oval Office talking about the riots. Now, this one's kind of long, but this will be a good end cap on this whole discussion. But here's what the president said in the Oval Office. Take a listen.
And Mr. President, when is the last time you spoke with Governor Newsom?
A day ago. Called him up to tell him, got to do a better job. He's doing a bad job, causing a lot of death and a lot of potential death. If we didn't send out the National Guard, and last time we gave him a little additional help, you would have, Los Angeles would be burning right now. Los Angeles would be not a lot different than what you saw take place in California and Los Angeles just a little while ago. And, you know, you got to remember, we have the Olympics coming. And we don't want people looking at Los Angeles like it would have been. It would have been bad. Last night they had total control. If we didn't have the military in there, the National Guard, and then we also sent in some Marines. We had some bad people. We have people, they look in your face and they spit right in your face. They're animals. And these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid troublemakers. They're agitators. They're paid. Do you think somebody walks up to a curb and starts hammering pieces out, has all the equipment necessary, and starts handing it out to people to use as a weapon? These are paid insurrectionists or agitators or troublemakers. You can call it whatever you want.
So they're being paid all the way around. And, you know, the story I just gave you was all of the NGOs that are funneling money on the front end for all of these, all of these riots. And they're probably paid protesters that are bussed in from other areas during the presidential campaign. There were rallies all across the place. I mean, there was actually a pretty significant, well, I mean, Sheridan's significant. So, I mean, we're not talking about thousands of people, but a significant protest down in Sheridan. And I took pictures of just about everybody that was there, and I showed them around to different people that I know, and not a single one of them said, yeah, I know that person. Now, there were some people that they knew, local prominent Democrats, but the vast majority of them, I've never seen them before. And now I drove around looking for a bus, and I didn't find one, but there were lots of reports of people being bussed in to participate in protests. Now, how do you do that? You got to have a job, right? If somebody's going to be off work to go protest, you got to give them some money. You got to eat, right? If you're not feeding a protester, they're not going to be able to protest. So a lot of the NGOs, they're funding this on a number of different levels. And the story that I just gave you about NGOs funding all of these social media influencers, I mean, they got to be paid too. Who knows how much they're being paid? Judging by the quality of the people that are pushing this message, I would say they're not getting paid very much. But anyway, I mean, there's a lot of money that's being funneled into this. It's labor unions, it's communist organizations, non-governmental organizations, groups that have been around for a really long time, MoveOn.org, The Color of Change, and all these people, I mean, I shouldn't say all of them, but most of them, I bet if you looked into them, you'd find the Tides Foundation and other George Soros entities involved in these. And you know, by and large, if there's a group that has a really flowery sounding name to it, you'll find spooky dude George Soros in there somewhere. You just got to dig deep enough, or you'll find the Center for American Progress, which is another George Soros funded organization. But they're all over the place, even in Wyoming. And so, so anyway, let's finish up listening to what the president had to say about all these protests.
And we ended it, and we have in custody some very bad people,
Mr. President.
Did you see the guy throwing the rocks at the police cars as they went by and crushing their windows and endangering our police? We're not going to let that happen, yeah.
Pardon me, Mr. President, on those Marines, Governor Newsom has described them as political pawns. I'm curious for your reaction to that and what you see as the Marines' role and what are their rules of engagement?
All I want is safety. I just want a safe area. Los Angeles was under siege until we got there. The police were unable to handle it. You could speak to the chief. He said it on television 3 nights ago. He said, this is more than we can handle. They said that. And the LA police, I know a lot of the police in LA, they're great people, but they're given instructions not to do this, not to do that. But in this case, they were trying their best. They were not able to handle it. It was out of control. When we got there, and you have to remember, I've been here before, and I went right by every rule, and I waited for governors to say, send in the National Guard.
Okay, this part is really important because he's hearkening back to his first term, the Portland riots, BLM, all of those things where, all you had to do was pay attention to the news a little bit. But I mean, Trump was constantly saying, "Hey, I'm just waiting for him. I got everybody ready to go. You give me the go ahead, and I'll send in the troops." But none of them did, because the violence that was happening in the various cities, downtown Minneapolis, Portland, Seattle. You remember when part of Seattle was taken over by protesters? They called it CHOP. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, I mean, that's the level to which the left went. And, Trump was saying, hey, the whole time, I'm going to send in the troops. You just tell me when. And the governors never did that. Well, as he's explaining right now, he's not waiting this time.
They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. And they just wouldn't do it. It kept going on and on, got worse and worse. And in Minneapolis, that city was burning down 7 days. And I said, I don't care. The governor, who's a governor that just happened to be running for vice president, a total, you talk about an incompetent governor. He's an incompetent person.
Tim Walz.
That he was picked. Well, I was actually very happy he was picked for other reasons. But this guy wouldn't call the National Guard. And we ultimately just sent in the National Guard. We stopped it. But that was after 7 days. And I said to myself, if that stuff happens again, we've got to make faster decisions, because they don't want to do it. The radical left, it's usually radical left, and it's usually governors that are Democrat, and they don't want to call them in. They don't want to save lives. They don't want to save property. All right.
So that's enough of that. I mean, you get the point. 3 minutes of Trump. I mean, I love the guy, but pretty much repeating the same thing over and over. But anyway, this is a coordinated effort. It is not grassroots. It is not organic. It's being funded by the radical left, a number of non-governmental organizations, and I'm betting if you boil them all down, the money's coming from one or two or just a small number of sources. But, all you got to do is go on the nokings.org website, look at the number of groups that are involved in this. And, I would suggest that you do that for any of these demonstrations. You almost always find the same small group of people, and that is definitely true in the state of Wyoming. I mean, Wyoming's a small state anyway. I often tell you that Wyoming is just one small town with really long streets on it, and that's true. I mean, so if you've got coordinated things happening, more than likely, it's the same small group of individuals doing it. I mean, there's not that many radical groups in Wyoming, though the number is growing, but almost always you'll find Wyoming Equality, the Equality State Policy Center, you'll find those groups there. The Democrat Party is behind a lot of this stuff, and certainly they're the ones that are pushing this No Kings protest throughout the state. So anyway, I mean, they're coordinated, and don't for a minute think that they're not. So I think a lot of us underestimate the words, I'm sorry. And for the last, I would say 2 weeks, we've been witnessing something to the equivalent of a third grade food fight between President Trump and Elon Musk. During the campaign and during when Doge was happening, Elon Musk and Trump, man, they were on the same page, working together. Everything was great. And then it all imploded. And I go back to the comment I made during the podcast that was, I think it was called a Titanic food fight, something like that. But I think if this was always going to happen, you can't have two guys with really big egos that are really powerful, super rich. I mean, they're super smart. You can't have two of those people in the same room at any time and expect that it's always going to work out. I think that, and Elon Musk, he's not really a conservative. I mean, he's got a lot of conservative leanings, and I really like the guy, and I like his companies, and I like what he's done. He's brilliant, but he's not a conservative, or at least he's a very new conservative. And so I think that this partnership between President Trump and Elon Musk was bound to implode sooner rather than later. And, I don't really like to, get my crystal ball out and try to say this person was thinking that, but I'll give you the political calculation that I would have made behind it. Say, well, getting elected, Elon Musk can help me get elected. It's probably not going to work out too good, but maybe it'll last long enough to help me out. I mean, I don't think that you can get beyond that. Well, Elon Musk went on Twitter and he said some pretty crazy things. And so much so that I made fun of it on this program and on the, and on the podcast. And so we had a little bit of fun with some AI. And so let's see if I've got a couple of those sound bites. I'll just play it for you. But the food fight did end up going to this level. So let's see here. Let's listen to this one.
Elon once stepped on a rake, and you know what happened? It hit him right in the Tesla coals. Do you get it? It's Tesla, all computer, but also testicles, which I'm told Elon barely has. Anyway, that's locker room talk. God bless America and Lee Greenwood, and screw China.
Okay, so, that's all made up. None of that's true, but the level at which the insults were coming, it's not far off of that. And that's why I call it, equivalent to a third grade food fight. So, for example, here's one of the Elon Musk ones I did. Just to have some fun anyway.
What most people don't realize is that Trump wasn't just on Epstein's island. Trump is Jeffrey Epstein. Think about it. It's the only thing that makes sense. I'd stake the lives of 4 of my 36 children on it.
Okay, so, and then the last one that we did of Elon, and this one is kind of where we're at right now, though, again, making fun of it, but here's the other one we did.
If I had a message to Donald, it would be, please let me come back. Let's start Doge up again, just like it was before, and let's pretend none of this ever happened. I really miss getting to sleep in my tent on the White House lawn. Donnie, please, I'm begging you to take me back.
Okay, still kind of funny, but we're not far off of that last one. This was posted on zerohedge.com, and it was written by Jeffrey Tucker of the Epoch Times, and it's entitled "The Case for Saying I'm Sorry." And here's where I get to get a little bit philosophical on you, but I don't think that we use those words often enough. Here's what Tucker has to say. Quote, Elon Musk and Donald Trump had a blow-up last week that grew unusually sharp, thus hitting headlines the world over. And after some days of thought and consideration, Elon apologized. Quote, I regret some of my posts about Donald Trump last week. They went too far. So now, while he didn't actually come out and say, I'm sorry, that's pretty much what he did. It was simple. It was concise. And there was no explanation behind it. It was just, hey, I went too far. So what Tucker says, the message is short and to the point, with no fluff. He apologized. No excuses, no sarcasm, no elaboration. No, he didn't take back his views that Trump should do more with the Doge cuts. He has doubts about the tariff agenda, and he thinks that the government needs to be cut to the bone, and that is not what's happening. He has doubts about other cabinet officials. He let his frustrations get out of control, and he posted about it. He has apologized, not for his views, but for the way they got carried out. Mostly, he rejects the personal attacks on Trump and the other matters that he said, quote, went too far. Now, everybody could feel the tension in the room fall to normal almost immediately. Even though Trump has said nothing back, it was enough for one man to simply say, I'm sorry. It made it international news. Every venue was going on about it. It's not only because there are some political implications that come from reconciliation, it's because it is astonishing to see someone actually apologize. We don't live in a world where people apologize often enough. Most of the time, it's done through, self-justification. Well, I'm sorry, but I did it this way. It's not plain and simple. It's not, I'm sorry and I won't do that again. Almost always nowadays, it comes with self-justification. Well, I'm sorry, but here's the reasons why I did that. The reasons don't really matter. If you're sorry about something, you just say it. You don't need to explain it. Now, isn't it amazing that just a few words that cost absolutely nothing? Still, they are rarely said. People cling to those words like personal treasure, as if saying them is surrendering an important part of yourself. In a sense, that's true, which is precisely why we should hear them more often. I'm sorry should be added to please and thank you as our magic words. Kids should be taught this, and not just by instruction, but by example, too. They need to see their parents say a genuine I'm sorry to each other. They need to observe adults simply owning their mistakes without excuses. And that's one of the important parts, too, to take ownership of whatever it is that you did. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody says the wrong thing on occasion. I don't, of course. I'm just kidding. Absolutely, I do. But for some reason, the practice of genuine apology seems to have vanished from our culture. Maybe it's due to the pop slogan from a 1970 movie, "Love means you never have to say you're sorry." Now, I personally despise that line, which I think is completely wrong. If you love somebody, if you like them, if you're friends with them, it means that you do have to say you're sorry. You're sorry. Still, it stuck. The phrase did. And if never saying you're sorry is an act of love, well, then we have some serious problems. There are exceptions when under legal duress and only as PR theatrics. We often hear, quote, CNN would like to offer an apology about X, Y, and Z. But we know for sure that this announcement is part of a legal settlement and therefore is not all that sincere. In one tactic I've heard recently, "I owe you an apology." That's admitting a debt, not actually apologizing. So it's not saying "I'm sorry for what I did." Nor is an apology that is immediately followed by a long string of circumstantial excuses and subtle blaming of everyone else a legitimate apology. Nor is saying "I'm sorry you're upset," or "you don't like this and I'm sorry about that." Those are not apologies, nor are you really saying that you're sorry about anything. See, there are many clever ways that we invent to keep from saying the thing that we ought to say. Why? It has something to do with the strange pain that comes with the surrender of ego. And as I mentioned, you have two people with titanic egos, Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And to a great degree, all of us. Verbalizing contrition without excuse is extremely difficult. You have to do it often and develop the habit. And that's probably why hardly anyone does it anymore. The costs are extremely high. As a result, resentment persists and festers, growing worse over time. Now, it's true in politics and in interpersonal relationships, too. Saying sorry requires humility. Here again, we live in times when that is nearly absent. Today's influencers believe they thrive on always being right, never wrong. People gain dopamine hits from fighting rather than getting along. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and everyone seems to be trying to either eat or avoid being eaten. Humility, contrition, and forgiveness as cultural institutions seem nearly extinct. As a result, lost trust is never regained and results in permanent fissures and long-time wars among people. Life is too short for all of us for this kind of nonsense. Each tick of the clock gets us closer to our expiration date, at which point none of it matters anyway. So how many times have you heard someone say a version of the following? "I would be glad to make up and go on like nothing happened, but not until I get an apology." Demanding it. Now, I figured out years ago what this means. It means nothing will ever get fixed. Waiting for someone else to apologize to you means that you'll be waiting forever, that apology will never come. Essentially, there is no experiential basis for waiting for someone else to apologize to you. There's only one answer. Make the first move. Do what Elon did. And if I did anything, quote, "if I did anything wrong, and I'm certain you believe I did, and no question I could have handled the conflict better, but I want to sincerely apologize to you and ask for your forgiveness." That is the phrase that all of us should utter more often. The truth is, if we did that, we could avoid a lot of the conflicts that we have. Now, why does this matter in the scheme of politics? Well, you have two people that are largely on the same page about a great many things. Two people who are extraordinarily influential in our politics, in our culture. And, if they are, it's important because those two people, at least one of them anyway, said, "I'm sorry." An attempt to mend the fence that was torn down in a moment of anger. Now let's just take this down to a personal level. I'm a big fan of saying, now, why is all this important to you and me? How often have we fired off an email that is vitriolic, or better yet, the Facebook post, the anonymous Facebook post? And, it's always followed by a comment that says, "Well, just don't take offense to this if it doesn't apply to you." That we avoid apology simply by putting something out publicly, when in truth, all those things should be handled privately. So good job, Elon, for admitting that you were wrong and saying that you went too far and apologizing to the good president. Hopefully something comes from it. Let's go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll finish up the program. I've got a couple of op-eds from the Cowboy. I really don't want to talk about them because one of them is from Chai-Com Som. Man, the guy just won't go away. I mean, he's a leftist, and I guess he's a GOP chairman now, whatever. Still think he has some influence, but he's still Chai-Com Som. And since he wrote an op-ed, I guess we got to talk about it. So we'll do that after the break. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia, Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be Gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to continue to expand. The program is always improving. And today, we're number 33 on the list of the 100 podcasts you should listen to in 2025. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the Cowboy State Politics studio is 307-374-8989. Now, before the break, I was telling you how we should say I'm sorry more often. And I, too, need to do that. So yesterday, I attempted to show you a funny Star Trek video, and I failed miserably. The thing was entirely, well, it was, you couldn't hear any of the audio, which is a shame because it was a really funny skit or sketch or whatever you want to call it about Al Sharpton. Well, I have found another one, and I think that I've figured out a way to show you it. And again, this time it's Captain Kirk meets Kamala Harris. Check this out.
Captain, a most curious development on scanner 57.
That's all. Take a look at it, Mr. Spock.
Screen on, Captain.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
At some point,
We are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. We're in the middle of a crisis caused by this pandemic that is a public health crisis. We're looking at over 220 million Americans who just in the last several months died.
I wanted to know if you think, and if you asked the United States to specifically accept more refugees.
Okay. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
No. It's Joe Biden. And don't start talking like a Republican about asking whether or not he's president.
Do you think Joe Manchin is a problem?
And it's Joe Biden, and I'm vice president, and my name is Kamala Harris.
All good.
Man, are we lucky. Are we lucky that we didn't end up with that woman as president? Holy crap. I mean, we barely survived 4 years of Joe Biden. Can you imagine what the country would look like if Kamala Harris was the president? So anyway, in the future, if there's any problems with anything on Cowboy state politics, just make sure that, feel free. Send me an email, send me a note, shoot me a message on Facebook Messenger or on Twitter or wherever else you want to get a hold of me. There's lots of different ways. But anyway, if there's ever a problem with Cowboy state politics, let me know. So to the cow pie. In an article entitled, Eliminating Property Tax Will Set Wyoming Back, and it's authored by none other than Chi-Com Som, former Speaker of the Wyoming House, Albert Sommers. I wish the guy would just go away. I mean, he got beat in the election. Nobody thought he was going to get beat, and Senator Pearson did a fine job doing it, and I'm much happier with her. Albert, go away. You're not a Republican, nor have you ever been, even though you are masquerading as one. Anyway, here's what Chi-Com Som Albert Sommers has to say. Quote, on June 3rd in Gillette, the Joint Revenue Committee passed a motion 11-3 to draft a bill to eliminate property taxes from the Wyoming Constitution. The motion was made by Natrona County Senator Bob Ide, who initially said he wanted to amend the U.S. Constitution before being corrected. What are the consequences of such a motion? Where did property taxes come from? Property taxes have funded local communities in America since this nation existed. Some accounts trace the first property tax to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1634. Wyoming first approved a property tax in 1876 during its territorial days. The retail businessmen and ranchers and bankers who built this state understood property tax was a necessary mechanism to provide the financial means to educate our citizenry and build thriving communities. But Senator Bob Ide and other members of the Freedom Caucus don't want the state constitution to hamstring their tax-slashing agenda. This agenda ignores the needs of our community. Oh, God, where to begin? First, Senator Bob Ide is not a member of the Freedom Caucus, nor are all of the conservatives in the House of Representatives, nor is anybody who espouses a conservative principle. This is a narrative that is being pushed by the radical left in Wyoming. And, Albert Sommers is definitely, in that group. I think if you look up, and unfortunately this outlet, I don't know, I guess it went away, but Evidence-Based Wyoming, during the 2023 session, Albert voted with the Democrats over an average of 80% of the time. Definitely not a Republican, definitely not a conservative. So let me tell you why Albert is a fan of property taxes, because it funds his liberal agenda. He is one of the people that believes that the most amount of taxes we can take from people, we absolutely ought to. There's no recognition on his part that property taxes are crushing Wyoming citizens. I know so many people that cannot pay their property taxes. There's a 80-some-year-old woman that I met that she had to take a job waiting tables at Perkins to pay her property taxes. That's outrageous. It is absolutely incredible. It's wrong that your property taxes go up 100% year over year. And that's what's happening, or it was until Senate File 69 was passed. And by the way, House Bill 45, I think that's what it was called, the 4% cap on property taxes. But the state of Wyoming has $30 billion in the bank. $30 billion. Now, a lot of that is tied up in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, which is where people like Albert Sommers and Steve Harshman take this giant windfall of taxes and put your money, it's not the government's money, don't ever think that's the case, it's your money. They suck it away in a permanent fund so that you can't get your hands on it. And, perish the day that Albert Sommers even thinks about giving any money back to Wyoming citizens. We have to spend as much as we possibly can, and there's no end in sight to it. I remember sitting in the House gallery when there was, I think it was a $700 million surplus from property taxes. And those redcoats on the floor of the House spent every dime of it. In fact, they spent way more money than they actually could. And they had to go back and fix some of the legislation because they didn't have the money to spend on it because they'd already spent it all. And here's the ridiculous part of it. It was on things that government had no business being involved in. Now, Albert Sommers says we have to fund education. That's true. It's unfortunately in the Wyoming Constitution. But to what degree? How much is enough? We're already in the top of U.S. states in per-student spending at around $20,000 per student. I haven't got the figure for this year, but it's right around there. Last year, it was $19,700 per student, so I'm guessing it's right around there. And and all of these people all the representatives, state officials that their voting records are very, very similar to Albert Sommers have the same feeling that we have to take as much money as possible, and so that we can throw as much money as possible at and education is always their number one. And there's no recognition that our test scores are barely mediocre. Now, you'll hear people from the representatives from the Wyoming Education Association and the Wyoming Department of Education say, oh, we're doing fantastic with our test scores. Really? When you get down to it, only half of eighth graders going into their freshman year in high school can read at a proficient level. I don't call that success, nor do I call it an achievement. And just to claim that, well, we're doing better than we were last year, that's not an achievement either. And it belies the argument that the more money we spend on education equals a better education. That's just not true. And statistically, it's proven not true, especially in Wyoming. And Albert Sommers was one of the people that is chiefly responsible for a lot of that spending. He was the Speaker of the House for 2 years, and before him, it was Eric Barlow. Eric Barlow and Albert Sommers, man, they're two peas in a pod when it comes to state government spending. Albert Sommers goes on. Our founders expressly put property tax in the Constitution because they knew that legislators would be tempted to eliminate taxes to garner votes in elections. No, actually, they put property taxes in there to fund state government. Now, I'm sure our founders were well aware of the possibility of, and I think if you look at the Wyoming Constitution, this is clear. There's more than 5 different passages about bribery, using your office for your position of influence to, for personal gain. There's all sorts of passages in there about that. But our founders were really, really smart in that they tied residential and commercial properties together. And the reason they did that is so that you couldn't independently raise taxes on businesses without hurting people in the houses, and vice versa. You couldn't raise taxes on homeowners without affecting business. Our founders, at the very least, put some constraints on the government. But when Albert Sommers was Speaker of the House, they did away with that provision in the form of a constitutional amendment that allows them to create all sorts of different property classes. It was my argument at the time that constitutional amendment would allow our legislators to monkey with the tax rates, to independently manipulate them to their own benefit for their own personal projects. And that, my friends, is exactly what has been happening. There was an op-ed out not that long ago that absolutely said that the whole point in passing the constitutional amendment was so that property taxes on businesses could be raised independently of those of homeowners. So Summers goes on, maintaining the constitutional link between property taxes and public services is not only wise, but it's necessary. Property taxes are more stable and have been the bedrock of public funding services that benefit Wyoming citizens and community. The Freedom Caucus claims to be constitutionalists, but the truth is they routinely try to ignore or alter the Constitution. Only when in so much as you have a constitutional amendment, that is, that we have to fund education or that we have to have property taxes, that is hurting Wyoming citizens, because that's absolutely what's happening. And if you try to change the Constitution, it's not like you're violating it. There are mechanisms in place to add amendments. The Redcoats do that all the time. That's exactly how Albert Summers, Liz Storr, and all the rest of them got the Amendment A passed so that they could independently monkey with the tax rates. Albert Summers could be accused of the very same thing that he's saying the Freedom Caucus does all the time. Now, this whole thing, eliminating property taxes, the idea was to replace it with a consumption tax, an increase in sales tax. Now, I would be in favor of that if we eliminated all other taxes along with it and went to a purely consumption tax. Albert's argument against that is there are some Wyoming communities that don't have as much industry, that don't have as much tourism, that don't have as much sales. Well, what Albert isn't telling you is that your sales tax largely goes to the states or to the state of Wyoming, and then those monies are divvied up among all of the counties. That's why they say that counties such as Teton are what they call recapture counties, because they produce way more tax revenue than actually goes into them. But if you had a consumption tax and if you got rid of all of the other taxes, tax on services, those sorts of things, I might be in favor of it. The reason why I hesitate to say that we should go to a consumption tax is that it is the most regressive tax possible, and that it disproportionately affects those people of lesser means more than others. So let me give you a quick example. If you're the guy that's making $100,000 a year, a 1 or 2 or 10% increase on sales tax really isn't going to hurt you all that much, especially if you do away with the property taxes. Property taxes are killing you, but on the sales tax, if we eliminated property taxes, probably wouldn't hurt you that much. But if you're the person that's working a minimum wage job and doesn't own property, that 1 or 2 or 10% increase on your sales tax hits you in the pocketbook harder than it does anybody else. And so if you were to eliminate all of the other taxes, tax on services, etc., and it was purely a consumption tax, I would be in favor of that. And the reason for it is it's entirely voluntary. If you don't want to pay high sales tax, don't buy stuff. Don't go buy a new car. Don't go buy, a new four-wheeler or a new motorcycle or whatever. I mean, if you want to pay taxes, go spend money. So it is purely a voluntary type of thing. But what Albert Summers is trying to do is to twist the argument, to say that we're going to completely destroy the and first of all, it's a slippery slope fallacy. I mean, Albert Summers is famous for these. But now he's using his position as a GOP chairman, and he doesn't mention this in the piece, but that's what he's doing, to try to influence people. Before he was a radical, pretty much Democrat. He's a radical redcoat in the House of Representatives. And he could do this stuff through policy, but now he has to actually make the argument. Here's how he ends it up. Their leader, Representative John Barrett, and he's referring to the Freedom Caucus, once said on the floor of the Wyoming House that some small towns should likely die. Well, that's completely taken out of context, and if you listen to the whole comment from John Barrett, that's not what he meant at all. Anyway, do we really want to lose small town Wyoming, the soul of our state? Okay, if you eliminate property taxes, you're going to be leaving a heck of a lot of money in people's pockets. And if you replace it with a consumption tax, that tax is entirely voluntary so long as you eliminate other forms of taxation along with it. His other argument in the piece is this is going to eliminate all of the taxes on industry. Well, Albert Summers, you were among the people that manipulated the Constitution through Amendment A that allows you to independently monkey with the tax rates between businesses and residential property. So why is it not possible then to exempt those industries that pay property taxes? I mean, the legislature can pretty much do whatever they want, and to say that this is the way that it has to go is absolutely absurd. But there again, so is Albert Summers. So he finishes up his piece in saying, quote, Imagine the collapse of local services and schools with no real plan to replace the lost funding. Electing people who will not think for themselves and are politically forced to follow some prescribed dogma or puppet master will ruin the state. There's the other line of attack that liberals and redcoats, or liberal redcoats, use against the Freedom Caucus, that nobody thinks for themselves, that they're getting their marching orders from D.C. Well, Albert Summers, I could turn the same argument upon you. How many lemmings did you have in the House of Representatives? How many people did you have that would vote the party line right along with you? For over 20, I would say more than that, probably 50 years, liberals controlled the Wyoming legislature. And it is only recently that conservatives are in control of one house of the legislature, not both. So pretty much the only thing that they can do is obstruct, which absolutely they should do. I mean, the government that works best works slowly, which is, lead into the next op-ed I'm going to tell you about. But Albert Summers, in your new role as a county Republican Party chairman, maybe you should start acting like a Republican. But of course, I know you can't do that because you're not really one of them. So the next piece here, and, I don't often, I kind of like this guy. And to back up on what I was going to say, I don't often do this, but I do this all the time. Go after op-eds and misguided thinking. But I actually like this guy, and I think that he's only misguided in one way. But it's a piece by Joseph Kibler, and you heard him on the program. I think it was, a month ago, we had him as a guest on the show. But he's got a letter to the editor, and it's entitled, "Who Wins When Our Leaders Fight?" From the very outset, I could say the people do. Government was made to work slowly. That our government was not constructed to work fast and to respond to problems that happen, in a moment's notice. Government works slowly. And the reason why it was meant to work slowly is it's really easy to trample people's rights. And if you move quickly, that is, you have unintended consequences. You're able to slip things into bills that don't necessarily need to be there. That's one of my big problems was one of my big problems with the big, beautiful bill, that I'm sure that there are all sorts of different provisions in there that probably nobody has read, since the bill is about 1,000 pages long. So when government works quickly, you end up hurting citizens. And there's no better example than Obamacare. Now, first of all, that bill was planned for a very, very long time. Very long time. It was written by a group called the Apollo Alliance. Another one of those flowery sounding groups that has been operating in the shadows, that's funded by radical leftists. But it was written for a very long time. When it came to Congress, they pushed it through on Christmas Eve using budget reconciliation. That's the little trick that they can use if something's directly related to the budget. It doesn't need to pass cloture. It only needs 51 votes to pass, and that's why they did it. They did it on Christmas Eve because most people were trying to be home with their families, and they would vote for pretty much anything. It was strategy. And so when things happen fast, people lose their rights. Here's what Kibler says, quote, "We've all seen the headlines. Wyoming Secretary of State Chuck Gregg and Governor Mark Gordon are locked in a power struggle over green energy, election integrity, constitutional authority, and control. Meanwhile, on the national stage, two of the most influential voices on the right, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, are publicly sparring over everything from politics to personality. So again, I ask, who actually wins when their leaders fight? The people? Nope. The principles? Hardly. The process? Definitely not." Well, unfortunately, I think Mr. Kibler is mistaken in that the people actually do. Take the fight between Governor Gordon and Chuck Gray. Now, if you read Kibler's piece, I think that Joseph is generally speaking on the right and on the right side of things. But in this case, I am so thankful that I have Chuck Gray there fighting Governor Gordon. What would you rather have? A Secretary of State, a member of our SLIB board, just go along with what the governor says? Go along with the 4 other members of the SLIB board just for the sake of getting along? I don't think so. I want conflict, and I do want political parties to argue amongst themselves so that we get good policy. That's the only way that happens. And in politics, it gets kind of vitriolic because, our whole system is set up to be adversarial. And by our whole system, I don't just mean the legislature. Think about it in terms of our court system. Our court system is definitely adversarial. You have a prosecuting attorney and you have a defense attorney. You have one side versus the other. The entire thing is set up to be deliberative, or it's supposed to be a deliberative body. And in order to do that, you have to argue. And sometimes when government grinds to a halt, I would argue most times government grinds to a halt, it's a good thing for the people. Because nothing is more dangerous to your liberty than when the legislature is in session. That is absolutely true. When the two parties are working together, somebody's getting screwed on the other end. The piece continues. When leaders go to war with each other, the only winners are the ones who benefit from delay, distraction, and dysfunction, usually lobbyists, bureaucrats, and career politicians who thrive in chaos. Meanwhile, the rest of us are left wondering who's fighting for us. Look, strong disagreement isn't the problem. Iron sharpens iron. But when personal feuds and political theater replace actual problem solving, we all lose. We don't elect leaders to trade insults on power plays. We elect them to get things done. Period. No, I disagree entirely. We elect leaders to represent us. Represent us in the middle of whatever political argument is happening. Should they solve problems? Yes, absolutely. But not at the expense of principle. Too often we have sided with the idea that, well, we just have to get things done. You have to compromise with me so that we can get this thing moving forward. The truth is that compromise doesn't really exist, that there really is no bipartisanship. Because what happens is the liberal left, and this is true in every state, in the U.S. Congress, pretty much everywhere, that when the word compromise is uttered, it literally means you abandon all your principles and do it our way, and then we'll call it bipartisan. How many times has that happened? How many budgets, how many increases on the debt ceiling have happened? How many times in the Wyoming legislature have good pieces of legislation been watered down to where they are utterly meaningless? How many times has that happened just to get the bill through? And that's the argument that they always use. Well, we had to add this to get the bill through. Truth is, the solution would have been better if you were just locked in negotiation and that you didn't get the bill through anyway. I would argue that the most successful legislative session would be one where we just repeal a bunch of laws. But Kibler continues. Let me be clear. I believe in standing your ground. Don't back down from your core values, but I also believe in rising above petty power games. Now, on that, he and I agree that when politics devolves into petty personal attacks, nothing happens. It's not an argument. But there again, the skilled politician, the person who has argumentative skill will sidestep all of those. And I think the problem that Mr. Kibler is pointing out is that we don't have skilled statesmen. We don't have people who can sidestep the argument and still govern effectively. I think that is probably what he's arguing. And on that point, we agree. Here's how he ends it. When our leaders fight, Wyoming stalls. We've got too much at stake to waste another day on ego wars. It's time to bring the focus back where it belongs, the people. I agree. Let's stop asking who's winning the political fights and start asking who's actually working to make Wyoming freer, stronger, and more secure. I agree. Because the real winner shouldn't be the loud voice in the room. It should be you. Let's write a different story, one where our leadership works and Wyoming wins. I would also agree with that. But to get to that point, you have political arguments. And that's how our system is set up. It is set up to be adversarial, and it was from its very beginning. If you want a government that's going to trample rights, if you want a government that's going to spend your money with no end in sight, then have two parties that get along. I mean, after all, what's better than owning one party? Owning two. And that's where Wyoming has been for a very long time. For probably 50 years, there's not really been any opposition in the Wyoming legislature. And now, finally, we have it. And what's happening? We're actually solving problems for Wyoming citizens. So, yeah, I get it. The political rhetoric is difficult to swallow. Sometimes it gets vitriolic, but that's part of the process. Government was meant to work slowly, not quickly. Every time it works fast, people's rights get stolen. And that's the end of it. Well, my friends, we burned through another busy broadcast, 2 hours, and we didn't get any calls today, but that's all right. The point is to leave the lines open. So if you want to be part of the program, you can call in. Now, we'll do this again next Friday on Open Line Friday. But have a good rest of your weekend. Keep your eyes peaked on the news, or your ears peaked, or whatever you want to call it. And watch what's happening with Israel. There's going to be a lot of news happening today and tomorrow. So I'll cover all of it when we come back on Tuesday's installment of the program. Also, don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast tomorrow. Weekend update. You don't want to miss it. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.